Behind the imposing walls and razor wire fences, a hidden world exists. A world shrouded in secrecy. This is the reality of prison. A world where survival is the only law, where hope can be a dangerous thing. This is not entertainment. We're going to take you inside some of the toughest prisons on earth. We'll meet the inmates, the guards, the families forever changed by this system. Prepare yourself for a journey into the darkest corners of humanity. This is the truth about prison, and it's time the world finally sees it. Step inside the concrete jungle, hear the clang of metal doors, the shouts echoing down the corridors. Smell the fear, the desperation, the hopelessness. This is the reality for millions incarcerated worldwide. Many are guilty, some innocent, all forgotten. But within these walls, their stories unfold, hidden from public view. Reduced to a number, a statistic, violence is a constant companion. The psychological scars, the broken families, the lost dreams. This documentary aims to shed light on these untold stories, to give a voice to the voiceless. For too long, the realities of prison have remained unseen, unheard. The suffering, the injustice, the sheer brutality swept under the rug of societal indifference. We'll travel across the globe, from the overcrowded prisons of Brazil to the notorious supermax facilities of the United States. We'll explore the differences, the similarities, the universal truths that bind the incarcerated experience. It's about rehabilitation, about redemption, about the possibility of change. It's about understanding the people behind the crimes, the systemic failures that lead to incarceration, and the urgent need for reform. This is a story that needs to be told. This is shocking prison realities. You won't believe what happens behind bars. Our journey into the heart of the prison system begins with a stark reality: the horrific conditions many inmates face daily. Forget the Hollywood depictions of spacious cells and 3 square meals a day. The truth is far more grim. Overcrowding plagues prisons worldwide, transforming them into breeding grounds for disease, violence, and despair. Imagine being crammed into a cell designed for 1, now shared with 2, maybe 3 other inmates. The air hangs heavy, thick with the stench of sweat, urine, and fear. Privacy is a luxury long forgotten. The walls seem to close in, suffocating, crushing the very will to live. This is the reality for countless souls trapped in the system. The human cost of such overcrowding is staggering. The deprivation experienced in many prisons extends far beyond the physical confinement. Basic necessities, often taken for granted in the outside world, become privileges, bargaining chips, or even weapons within the prison walls. Access to adequate healthcare is often limited, with inmates facing long waits for treatment, inadequate medical care, and a shocking lack of mental health services. The result? Untreated injuries, festering wounds, and psychological scars that run deeper than any razor wire. Food, the most basic of human needs, becomes another tool of control. Forget balanced meals and nutritional needs. Inmates often describe bland, barely edible food served in meager portions. Stories of maggot-infested meals and food poisoning outbreaks are not uncommon, highlighting the disregard for human dignity that permeates many of these institutions. This constant hunger, this deprivation of basic sustenance, becomes a form of psychological torture, a constant reminder of their confinement and the powerlessness of their situation. In the unforgiving ecosystem of prison life, where power dynamics shift constantly, survival hinges on more than just physical strength. Respect, or rather, the fear it instills, becomes a currency more valuable than any contraband. It dictates your place in the hierarchy, your access to resources, and ultimately, your safety. For many inmates, especially those new to the system, navigating this complex web of alliances and rivalries becomes a matter of life and death. Violence, often brutal and unforgiving, permeates daily life within these walls. Gangs rule with an iron fist, enforcing their own codes of conduct and demanding unwavering loyalty. Disputes, even minor disagreements, can escalate quickly, leaving inmates vulnerable to assaults, stabbings, and even murder. The threat of violence hangs in the air like a toxic fog, a constant reminder that one wrong move, one misjudged word, could have fatal consequences. This constant state of hypervigilance, this need to be prepared for violence at any moment, takes a devastating toll on the human psyche, leaving many emotionally scarred long after their release. While physical violence casts a long shadow over prison life, it's the unspoken terrors, the psychological torment that can leave the deepest wounds. Isolation, a tool often used for punishment or control, becomes a weapon that chips away at the soul. Solitary confinement, sometimes for days, weeks, or even months on end, can shatter the mind, pushing inmates to the brink of madness. The silence becomes deafening. The lack of human interaction, the sensory deprivation, can trigger a cascade of mental health issues, from anxiety and depression to hallucinations and psychosis. The stories that emerge from these concrete tombs are harrowing tales of human resilience pushed to the breaking point, of minds teetering on the edge of oblivion. The worst part wasn't the darkness, or even the loneliness, recalls James Williams, who spent 2 years in solitary confinement. These invisible scars, the psychological wounds inflicted within the cold, sterile walls of solitary confinement, often linger long after the physical chains have been removed, a haunting reminder of the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. Section 1. Behind the Bars, Voices from the Void. Statistics paint a stark picture of prison life, but they can't fully convey the raw, visceral reality. To truly understand what goes on behind those walls, we need to hear the voices of those who lived it, who endured the nightmare of incarceration. These are the stories the system tries to silence, the whispers of humanity echoing through the cold, unforgiving corridors of our prisons. We spoke to ex-inmates from different backgrounds, different crimes, yet their stories share a chilling commonality. The dehumanization, the brutality, the constant struggle to hold on to their sanity in a system seemingly designed to break them. Their experiences, though difficult to hear, are a stark reminder of the human cost of incarceration. You're stripped of everything that makes you human, says James, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the camera. Section 2. The Scars of Isolation, John's Story. John, a former school teacher convicted of drug possession, spent 5 years in a state penitentiary. Soft-spoken and thoughtful, he recounts his experience with a chilling detachment, his words measured, as if carefully chosen to avoid unleashing the demons still lurking within. He speaks of the constant fear, the ever-present threat of violence, but it's the isolation, the soul-crushing loneliness that seems to have left the deepest scars. He spent 2 of those 5 years in solitary confinement, locked away in a small, windowless cell for 23 hours a day. The silence was the worst, he says, his voice dropping to a low murmur. It was like a living thing, pressing down on you, suffocating you. His words paint a harrowing picture of the psychological torture inflicted within those concrete tombs, a stark reminder that isolation, far from rehabilitating, can break even the strongest of wills. Section 3. The Price of Freedom, Maria's Fight. Maria's story is a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, even when confronted with unimaginable adversity. Convicted of manslaughter at the age of 18, she spent 8 years navigating the brutal realities of a women's correctional facility. Her crime, a desperate act of self-defense against an abusive partner, earned her a harsh sentence, one that separated her from her infant son. "They took everything from me," she says, her voice trembling with barely suppressed emotion. "My freedom, my dignity, my child." She speaks of the rampant sexual abuse within the prison, the constant fear of violence, the struggle to maintain her sanity while grieving the loss of her son. Maria's story is a testament to the power of human connection, even in the most unlikely of places, and a reminder that even within the walls of prison, hope can still bloom. Section 4. Echoes of Trauma Life After Release. The journey doesn't end at the prison gates. For many ex-inmates, the trauma of incarceration continues to haunt them long after their release. The stigma of a criminal record follows them like a shadow, making it difficult to find employment, secure housing, or rebuild their lives. The psychological scars, the nightmares, the paranoia, the difficulty reintegrating into a society that often views them with suspicion and fear can make the transition back to normal life seem impossible. "You never really leave prison," says David, who served 7 years for armed robbery. "It stays with you in here," he adds, tapping his temple. Their stories serve as a powerful reminder that the true cost of incarceration extends far beyond the prison walls, impacting not just the individuals involved, but families, communities, and society as a whole. Section 1. Global View, Beyond Borders. The stark realities of prison life we've explored so far are not unique to any one nation. From the overcrowded cells of Brazil to the high-security facilities of the United States, the story of incarceration is often one of deprivation, violence, and despair. But while the themes may be universal, the specifics of prison systems vary dramatically across the globe. In this part, we'll journey beyond borders, examining how different countries approach punishment and rehabilitation. From the brutal conditions of overcrowded penitentiaries to the progressive models that prioritize reintegration, we'll witness a spectrum of approaches, each with its own set of challenges and controversies. By comparing these contrasting systems, we'll gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of criminal justice and the ongoing debate over the true purpose of imprisonment. Section 2. The Iron Fist, Inside a Brazilian Prison. Our first stop takes us deep into the heart of the Brazilian prison system, a sprawling network of overcrowded and underfunded facilities grappling with rampant violence and corruption. Here, the line between order and chaos blurs, and survival becomes a daily struggle. We enter a world where gangs hold sway, where violence is a currency of power, and where hope seems like a distant memory. The air hangs heavy with the stench of sweat, urine, and fear as we navigate the dimly lit corridors of a maximum security prison in Sao Paulo. The sheer number of inmates is overwhelming. Cells designed for 10 overflow with 30, 40, even 50 men. The lack of basic sanitation is appalling, with overflowing toilets and open sewers contributing to the spread of disease. Gangs control everything from food distribution to protection, their power cemented through intimidation and violence. From the brutal realities of Brazil, we travel north to Norway, a model for progressive criminal justice. Here, the focus shifts from punishment to rehabilitation, with an emphasis on reintegration and restorative justice. Halden Prison challenges conventional incarceration. It resembles a college campus more than a prison, with spacious cells, workshops, and even a recording studio. Inmates pursue education, learn new skills, and prepare for a successful return to society. Norway boasts one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world. The stark contrast between the Brazilian and Norwegian approaches to incarceration highlights the fundamental debate over the purpose of prison. Is it about punishment and retribution, or is it about rehabilitation and reintegration? Should we prioritize keeping dangerous individuals off the streets, or should we focus on addressing the root causes of crime and breaking the cycle of recidivism? There are no easy answers, and the best approach likely lies somewhere between the two extremes. However, the evidence suggests that simply warehousing people in overcrowded and inhumane conditions is not only morally reprehensible but also counterproductive. When we strip individuals of their dignity and humanity, we diminish their capacity for change. The global view of prison systems reveals a world divided, grappling with the complexities of crime and punishment. As we move forward, we must ask ourselves what kind of society we want to create. Do we want a system that perpetuates cycles of violence and despair, or one that offers hope, second chances, and a path to redemption? The choice is ours. The walls may be concrete and steel, but the true weight of prison is carried within. It's a crushing burden on the mind, body, and soul, a constant pressure that can warp even the strongest of individuals. Imagine, if you will, the feeling of being trapped, caged like an animal, stripped of your freedom and dignity. This is the daily reality for millions incarcerated worldwide, forced to exist in an environment designed to punish and control. The constant noise, the lack of privacy, the ever-present threat of violence. It's a sensory overload that grinds down the human spirit, leaving many emotionally and psychologically shattered. It's like being buried alive, says Michael, a former inmate who served 15 years for armed robbery. You can feel the weight of the world pressing down on you, suffocating you. You're trapped, both physically and mentally. His words paint a vivid picture of the suffocating reality of confinement, a reality that leaves few unscathed. Section 2. The Mind Behind Bars. Psychological Impact. The psychological impact of incarceration is perhaps the most insidious and long-lasting consequence of imprisonment. The isolation, the lack of meaningful human interaction, the constant fear. It takes a heavy toll on the human psyche. Studies have shown that inmates experience significantly higher rates of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, PTSD, and psychosis, than the general population. Imagine being locked away in a small, windowless cell for 23 hours a day, with nothing but your thoughts and the echoing silence for company. The sensory deprivation, the lack of stimulation, can drive even the most stable individuals to the brink of madness. The silence is deafening, says Sarah, a former inmate who served time for drug possession. It gets inside your head, starts to twist your thoughts. You start to doubt yourself, your sanity. You feel like you're going crazy. Her words echo the experiences of countless inmates who have endured the psychological torture of solitary confinement. Section 3. The Body as a Cage. Physical Repercussions. The physical toll of incarceration is often overlooked, overshadowed by the more visible psychological scars. But the reality is that prison takes a heavy toll on the body as well. Poor nutrition, inadequate health care, and lack of access to fresh air and exercise can lead to a host of health problems, including heart disease, diabetes, respiratory illnesses, and chronic pain. Inmates are also at increased risk of infectious diseases such as tuberculosis and hepatitis C due to overcrowding, poor sanitation, and shared needles. The lack of access to quality healthcare means that even minor ailments can quickly escalate into serious, even life-threatening conditions. I went in healthy, but I came out a broken man, says John, a former inmate who spent 10 years in prison for assault. The food was garbage, the medical care was non-existent, and the constant stress took a toll on my body. I left with a bad heart, diabetes, and a chronic cough that never seems to go away. His story highlights the often overlooked physical consequences of incarceration. Section 4. Invisible Scars. The Lifelong Sentence. For many ex-inmates, the true sentence begins after they walk out of the prison gates. The stigma of a criminal record follows them like a shadow, making it difficult to find employment, secure housing, or rebuild their lives. They face discrimination, prejudice, and a society that often views them with suspicion and fear. The invisible scars of incarceration, the trauma, the nightmares, the paranoia, can linger for years, even decades after release. Many struggle with addiction, mental health issues, and the challenges of reintegrating into a world that has moved on without them. It's like you're living in a cage of your own making, says Lisa, a former inmate who served time for drug trafficking. You're free, but you don't feel free. You're haunted by your past, by the mistakes you made, by the person you used to be. Her words capture the invisible chains that continue to bind many ex-inmates long after they've served their time. Section 1. The System's True Face. We've journeyed deep into the belly of a beast few dare to confront. Witness the crushing weight of confinement, the slow death of hope. Listen to the voices of the forgotten, the discarded, the silenced. Their stories reveal the true face of our prison system, more concerned with punishment than rehabilitation. From overcrowded cells to solitary confinement, we've seen humanity stripped away. The statistics paint a grim picture, but individual stories truly haunt us. The young inmate in Sao Paulo, eyes filled with fear and defiance. The former schoolteacher whispering about the soul-crushing silence of solitary. The mother, robbed of freedom and child, clinging to hope. These are not just statistics, not just headlines. These are human beings, trapped in a system designed to break them. Section 2. Beyond the walls, within ourselves. The walls of our prisons may seem impenetrable, but their reach extends far beyond those imposing gates. The impact of incarceration ripples outward, touching families, communities, and society as a whole. The stigma that follows ex-inmates long after they've served their time, to escape the shadow of their past. A cost we all pay, whether we acknowledge it or not. The indifference that often greets those who emerge bearing the invisible scars of their confinement. The truth is, those walls exist within each of us. Section 3. Seeds of change. This journey into the heart of darkness has been difficult to bear. The images, the stories, the injustices, they stay with us, demanding our attention. But within the darkness, we've glimpsed flickers of hope, seeds of change. We've seen the power of human connection even in the most unlikely places. Inmates supporting each other, sharing stories, offering hope in despair. Dedicated individuals, inside and outside, working tirelessly for reform. Offering education and rehabilitation programs to help inmates break free from the cycle of recidivism. The path forward is not easy, but it is one we must forge together. It starts with acknowledging the humanity of those behind bars, recognizing their stories are our stories, their struggles intertwined with our own. It requires us to confront our biases, our fears, and demand a system prioritizing rehabilitation over retribution. This is not a call for leniency, but for justice. Justice recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being, regardless of their past mistakes. Justice offering a path to redemption, a chance to heal, to grow, to return to society as productive members. This is the challenge before us, a challenge we must meet with courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to building a more just and humane world for all.